Congressman. Thanks for being with us. So the initial findings say that the committee has found, quote, no evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Do you stand 100% behind that assertion?
Absolutely, 100%. And it's very clear. And by the way, it's not just this committee that's drawn that conclusion. As Manu just said, this senior Democrat or Republican on the Senate side says the same thing. So does Dianne Feinstein, the senior Democrat on the Senate committee. So did Director Clapper. I mean, I would invite anyone, tell me the strongest piece of evidence that you have that supports the theory of collusion. Because Anderson, there just isn't. And we've been looking at this for going on 15 months now.
Let me ask, the committee, as Manu pointed out, didn't interview Paul Manafort, didn't interview Rick Gates, Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, didn't subpoena bank records, Steve Bannon, Hope Hicks, Corey Lewandowski, Donald Trump Jr. They refused to answer a number of the committee's questions. Given that, how is the investigation complete? How should the American people have confidence that it's complete?
There's two groups of people there. The first four individuals that you talked about are under indictment by the special counsel. We cannot interview them now.
Right.
We will allow the special counsel to continue with his investigation. So anyone who brings up those four people either doesn't understand the process or isn't being honest about it. The other individuals you mentioned, many of them have come before the committee more than once. Hope Hicks was with our committee for something like 8 or 9 hours. I heard the same question asked again and again and again, with the same answer given again and again and again. We just at some point come to the conclusion there's just not much more to learn here.
But didn't a lot of their answers essentially say, I'm not going to answer that question? I mean, a lot of them seem to claim some sort of, some sort of right not to answer questions based on presidential privilege.
Sure, there were a few. There was actually one individual, and that's Mr. Bannon, who I disagree with and was frustrated and angry with at the time, and expressed that anger and frustration. He took a very generous interpretation of executive privilege or some right to protect himself, which we didn't agree with, and we forced him to come back. Mr. Lewandowski, for example, he came back over 2 questions, and it wasn't that he refused to answer them. In the initial 9-hour interview, he just said, I want to be careful, I want to prepare to answer that question, and he came back and answered those questions. So I think the narrative or the story that these witnesses weren't willing to work with us is just not true. As I said, many of them were there for a long day and answered the questions that we asked them.
There were a number of witnesses which Democrats on the committee wanted subpoenas to be issued against that Republicans declined. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are some, but Anderson, look, this is important. They gave us a list of, I think, 83 witnesses. Some of them are Russians. One of them, for heaven's sakes, has passed away. He's no longer living. There's no way in the world those Russians are going to come talk to our committee. So therefore, do we not issue a report until we talk to them? In that case, we'll never issue a report. We feel a responsibility to tell the American people what we've learned. And there's 2 things I would say on this. We're coming up on the next election. Let's tell them our initial conclusions. Let's let them see what we've learned. And the second point is this. If there's more evidence that comes forward, we will pursue that. If there's something dramatic that comes forward, we're not going to turn a blind eye to that. But this is just an initial report to tell the people what we know at this point.
So the former DNI director who you just referenced and who put together the U.S. intelligence community's report on this was asked if there's any chance that the Russians' goal was to sow discord but not necessarily help then candidate Trump. I just want to play what he had to say about that.
No, I don't agree. I think their objectives evolved over time, and certainly to start with, they were interested in sowing as much doubt and discord as they possibly could. And because of starting with personal animus that President Putin had for Hillary Clinton, they wanted to do everything they could to hurt her. Then when things got serious with then candidate Trump, particularly when he became the nominee, they were attracted to him because they thought that he would be much better for them.
Clapper 2 hours ago saying your committee's findings are wrong and that the current office of the Director of National Intelligence, which President Trump appointed the head of it, is also standing by that 2017 assessment. So what did the Republicans on the Intelligence Committee see that the FBI, the CIA, and the DNI missed?
Yeah, I agree and then I disagree with the former DNI. I agree that they initially were just trying to sow discord to break down the foundations of trust. No question about that. But I have done something now that he has not done. And that is I have spent a couple days out to the CIA actually reading the raw intelligence, actually reading what we were basing this on. And when we release that report, we're going to be able to show, you know what, the CIA just got it wrong. Just like they did, by the way, in the Gulf War, where they said there was weapons of mass destruction that we didn't find. The CIA is not perfect. They often, or at least from time to time, will make mistakes, as do I, as do you, as do any agency. And we're just going to have to show people they were wrong on this. They just misinterpreted some very key intelligence and drew the wrong conclusions. That's actually a separate topic, and I look forward to talking about that because we'll be able to release some of that information to the American people.
Isn't that then I mean, aren't we talking about really the entire intelligence community having come to this conclusion? And I mean, if what you're saying is true, that is a massive failure of U.S. intelligence.
Well, there's this one thing that's often said, at least it was said initially, all 17 agencies in the IC have concluded, and that wasn't true at all. It was the CIA, the FBI, and then by extension, the DNI. Those were the only ones who drew this conclusion, and Director of NSA said, I agree with it, but not with the same type of high degree of confidence. But once again, some of those individuals, many of those individuals, haven't had access to the raw intelligence like those of us on the committee have. And all we can do, Anderson, is go look at it and then try to report on our conclusions to it and try to do it in a fair manner.
So you're saying people at the CIA didn't have access to CIA raw intelligence or FBI?
I'm saying that some of the other individuals who have, as Director Clapper did earlier, said that's not my conclusion, but I don't believe that he's gone out and looked at the raw intelligence like some of us on the committee have.
As head of DNI, would he not have had access to that intelligence?
Oh, he certainly would have. It's just whether he took the time to go do it.
The fact that the Republican chairman of the committee, Chairman Devin Nunes, went to the White House, as you know, to give them information that it turns out the White House had in fact provided to him, and then essentially sort of seemed to try to cover it up or explain it away. Why should people have confidence in these findings? It does seem a very polarized. I mean, this is traditionally a committee which could be relied upon for bipartisanship. I mean, you're handling the most sensitive information. Yeah. It does seem to have been hopelessly divided really from the get-go.
It has been very disappointing for many of us on the committee who enjoyed the bipartisan atmosphere of that committee previous to this. And we would like to recapture some of that. I have to tell you, I don't agree with your characterization of those events. I'll let Devin Nunes speak to that. He's capable of doing that, but I don't believe that, again, I don't agree with necessarily with the way you've described it or characterized it. But let me make another point if I could. You're saying, well, Devin Nunes did something that we find kind of unusual or we can't understand, therefore the committee and the work of the committee is irrelevant or biased or somehow flawed. You know, that would be like me saying that some of the things that, look, I could go down a long list of things that the ranking member, Mr. Schiff, has said that turned out not to be true. Or things that he's done. For example, when he was kind of joked by a Ukrainian radio station into thinking he was talking to investigators and trying to set up meetings with them. But I therefore don't say, well, everything he says then is irrelevant or inaccurate or wrong. I think that would be unfair. You have to look at this in its totality. If you are disagreeing with Chairman Nunes on some action he took, to be fair, look at this in its totality. And by the way, wait until you see the report. Wait until you see our conclusions. I think once you do, you're going to say, this seems reasonable. It doesn't seem partisan. We tried very, very hard not to be partisan. We try very hard not to accuse people. We try very hard to provide positive recommendations for how we can avoid this in the future.
Just for the record, at the beginning of the interview, you quoted Senator Dianne Feinstein as saying there was no collusion. To be clear, she was asked months ago if she'd seen any evidence of collusion, and she said not so far.
That's right. And if she has anything between now and then, please bring it towards our committee, because she certainly has not done that.